Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In the previous video, I showed you how to partition a table using T-SQL. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly the same demonstration of partitioning a table, but this time I'm going to do it through a GUI, through a graphical user interface. One thing you'll notice is that if I right-click on the AdventureWorks 2012 database, go to Properties, Files, I don't see any of the files that I created in the previous video. And if I go to File Groups, I don't see any of the file groups that I created. And if I go to the individual locations, the D, E, F, I don't have any data there either. And that's because I've already deleted the previous database and then restored it from my backup. So let me repeat that. The way I got this AdventureWorks is even before I showed you that demonstration, I did a backup of the database. And then now I deleted the database and I'm going to start fresh. Key note, do not do this in a production environment. Let me repeat that. Do not do this in a production environment. Don't delete the database and restore the database in order to eliminate the partitioning. I'm doing it for ease of purpose and demonstration. I don't want to go through the process of showing you how to remove it because that's something entirely different. So remember, back up your database initially, even before you do anything, and then make a backup of that. Run the previous video that I did. And then restore the database with a replace or delete and restore. So that's how I got to this stage. So let's move on. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me exactly highlight this as we go along so we'll know what we've done. So if I do the select statement against that database, you'll notice I have the same amount of rows as I did. That's fine. If I looked at the distinct values that I want to partition by, you'll note that the partition function is the year that I've chosen, and it was 2005, 2006, 2007, and here's the row counts for the appropriate function. And as you notice, we created physical files. So when I deleted the database, AdventureWorks 2012, it removed all the files from the appropriate, actually there's nothing in there, it just looks like it, appropriate drives. So obviously when you delete it, they'll be removed. So now if I run this, as I said, you'll get the functions that we want. So now the first thing we did, obviously, in the GUI version was to create these separate file groups. So let's see how you do that. So in a GUI, it's easy. Right-click the database, go to Properties, go to File Groups, and then just go Add File Groups. And then obviously now start adding the file groups. So it was called Drive D. That was one of them. Then add again and Drive E. So remember, these are the physical file groups, the containers, if you will, that will contain the files that we're going to create after this. And the reason I'm doing this is to illustrate how to divide and conquer the partition database. So let me carry my last one. And there we go. So now we have four file groups. So go OK. And that's fine. So the next thing we want to do, so this is being done right here. So let's move on. So the next thing we want to do now is create the necessary files and associate them with the various drives. So the way to do that, again, is go to AdventureWorks 2012. Go Properties, Files, and now I'm going to add file groups to those files to those file groups. Go Add. Here, I'm going to name it. So what do we want to name it? We named it. I'm going to actually keep exactly the same that we did just the last time. And I'm going to select the file group that this file should go to. And that's Drive D. And then the physical drive that I wanted to direct to, so I'm going to go click on here, and I'm going to go Drive D. Now this obviously, again, is emulating the physical drive. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to repeat this whole process again for each function that we selected, and that was this date range. Select the appropriate file groups that I want to go to. This one is going to be E. Again, I want the hard drive, if you will, E. And obviously I have to repeat this 2 more times. So let's repeat that here. DEF. And then the last one, which is anything beyond the first three. So let's place that here. Let's select the file group that I want to associate it with G, and let's change the hard drive again, quote unquote. And once I do that, now we've created the files, and that's great. So now we've done this part. So now the next thing obviously is to do, it's a three-part system, is create the partition function and create the partition schema. Remember, the function is going to provide us with the date range that we want, and then the schema is going to associate these files to the appropriate file groups. So the way to do that is right-click the database, expand the database, go to the table that we wish to partition. At this point, like I said previously, all we've done is created file groups and files. We have not done anything about any particular table. So you can select any table if you wish, not necessarily the one I'm doing. This is basically creating a template. So now I'm going to go to the production table that we were working with, which one? This. So right-click, storage, and there you see create partition. And then obviously you'll get this wizard saying what you're going to do. You're going to select the column which you want to partition. You're going to select the partition function. You're going to select the partition map the partition file group to a specific range, and then it'll create a script at the end, and I'll show you that entire script. So go next. Now this asks for selecting a partition column. Remember which partition do we want to base it on? We said we're going to base our partition on transaction date, and here's the data type, date time. So go next. Now it's asking for obviously a partition function name, so we'll just call it fn history for the sake of simplicity. Let me copy that because I'm going to need to do it again for schema. So that's the partition name. Now I'm going to call it schema, so I'll just call this sch history. Go next. And now it's asking for the mapping of the directions, mapping of the range. So first thing we have to do is select the appropriate file group. And now we want to, all the data is going to go to this drive, into that drive. So again, go to here now. This is the date range that I want. So I'm just going to copy this. Let me just expand this. One thing you'll notice here, let me just move here. One thing you notice, I'm entering the entire date, including the year, the month, and the day, including the time, the hour, the minute, the second, and the millisecond, right up to the end of the time. So all the data up to this millionth of a hundredth of a second will be populated in drive D. So now I'm going to do the same for drive E. And again, I'm going to collect all the data for 2006. And I'm going to repeat that for 2007. Paste it here, and I'm going to go estimate, and that's it. And you can see obviously the row counts. Oops, the one thing you have to do, if you will get that message if you do not select the last one, and the select file group, meaning if you don't have these boundaries going into this, where do you want the remain? If you have data that is not within this boundary, then where do you want to go? So I want to go to G, as we said, and then go next. And now it's obviously going to create the script that we can do it. It's going to, you can save it to a clipboard or clip it to a new window. We're going to save this because I want you to see it. Go to next. And obviously here it gives you the summary. So you can go through the summary, make sure you've got the appropriate database and table, which we do, and go finish. It just takes a second to create that. Now, if I minimize this, now you'll notice here that, I didn't work exceedingly hard trying to get that script written, even though I can, but it's a lot easier just to create this script this way and then learn about it, and then you can modify this if you wish. So now that's that being done, I'm just going to execute it. And it'll just take a few seconds, and there it is. And now the table has been partitioned. And now we can, you can obviously copy this, but we've already got it, so we don't need to cut it, which is right here. So now that we've actually partitioned the table, we can start looking at it again, and we should get the same results. Partition 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, partition 4 does not have any data because all the data has been assigned to the first 3 partitions based on the partition function or the range of data. And again, if we insert a row that does not conform to this partition of years of 2005, 2006, 2007, then it should dump itself here. So let's see if it does. And 1 row affected, and again we can start looking at this data which we've already looked at. Oops, partition. Let me see what's going on here. It could be that I think because I changed the name, obviously, so we have to be careful here. So what do we call the partition here? What do we call the partition function? That's the reason. I'm not calling it, I'm calling it a different partition. Let me look at the properties. And here it is. So we called it partition function. What did I call it now? I can't remember what I called it. Just give me a second. Let me pause this. I'll be back in a second. And we're back, and obviously I called it FN history. So that's why we had that little glip. So obviously make sure you remember the function name if you decide to change it. But anyway, so now you can see that when we do this data, we see that actual insert of the data that's already being done. So I think that I'm going to leave it here. I think you get an idea now how the process, as I said, of creating a partition function, whether you do it through T-SQL or through a GUI, is relatively straightforward and easy. It's just the decisions that you need to come to that make it a little more difficult. And that obviously only takes experience. But now that you have a clear understanding of how to partition a table, if you should suffer from performance issues if the table gets extremely large. So I think I'm going to leave it here and continue with the next video. So my name is Rafael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video.